In 1972, a French physician named Michel Siffre did something crazy. He went underground, literally. For 180 days, he lived in total isolation in a cave in the south of France, with no clocks, no sunlight, no human contact. No, seriously, like no human contact. He was completely alone. And what happened next shattered everything he thought he knew about time. When Siffre first entered the cave, he had every intention of living like a normal human being. But after a few weeks, his body seemed to forget the 24-hour cycle that society forces on us and naturally shifted into a 48-hour rhythm. He would be awake for 36 hours, then spend the next 12 hours in deep sleep. He wasn't going crazy. This was actually biology. You see, when you remove yourself from the constraints of society, your body will revert to its natural rhythms. For most people, that means a 24-hour day just isn't natural. Sure, we all operate on a roughly 24-hour cycle, but that doesn't mean it's the best choice, or maybe even the second best choice, or maybe even the third best choice. We don't really know. The problem is that modern society doesn't take these natural rhythms into account. We force ourselves to wake up at 7 a.m., eat lunch at 12 p.m., have dinner at 6 p.m., all so we can stay in sync with the sun during the summer. Okay, that makes sense. But what about in the winter, when the sun rises at 8 a.m. and sets at 5 p.m.? Do we really need to keep forcing ourselves to wake up at 7 a.m.? Siffre's cave experiment raises some very disturbing questions. Are we forcing ourselves into a schedule that goes against our biology? Would we be healthier, more creative, and less stressed if we lived by our natural cycles instead of society's 9 to 5? Could this be the reason why so many of us struggle with sleep, burnout, and anxiety? The truth is, we don't really know because modern society has only been around for a few hundred years. As a result, we've never had enough time to fully understand its effects on our biology. But something tells us it's not good. Now, before we continue, make sure to hit the like button. It really helps us out. And consider subscribing to stay up to date on all things curiosity. When Siffre emerged from the cave after 5 months, he was a different person. He was more relaxed, more reflective, and his blood pressure and pulse rate were lower than when he entered the cave. But he was also deeply disturbed by what he learned during his time underground. In total darkness, he couldn't tell whether it was daytime or nighttime, so he began measuring the hours by the phases of the moon. At first, the lunar cycle seemed random and chaotic, but after a while, he noticed a pattern. There were roughly 27 cycles in every 360-day year, and each cycle consisted of about 26.5 hours. In other words, his internal body clock had shifted from 24 hours to 27 hours, and he wasn't the only one. Another man who spent a few months in total darkness in the 1970s emerged with a 25-hour day. And in 2009, a woman who spent a year in solitary confinement developed a 48-hour cycle, spending 36 hours awake and the next 12 hours asleep. This isn't some kind of weird side effect or freak occurrence. These people are simply living according to their natural rhythms. And it turns out they're not the only ones. Various studies have found that most people naturally sleep for between 10 and 12 hours per day. But we force ourselves to stay awake for 16 hours per day. So why do we do this? Well, it makes sense when the sun is up. But now that we've invented artificial light, why do we continue to force ourselves to live according to the sun? What's the point? Well, as it turns out, there may be a real reason. Scientists conducted an experiment to find out whether plants and microbes in the soil use chemicals to communicate. But here's the kicker. Scientists discovered that the gene responsible for TOC1 is only found in plants and microbes. Animals, including humans, don't have this gene, so it seems like we're on our own when it comes to figuring out our natural rhythms. But the fact that we're on our own doesn't mean we're doomed. After all, we're pretty good at adapting to new environments. So maybe it's time we adapted to our natural rhythms. Maybe it's time we stopped forcing ourselves to live according to society. It's 9 to 5, and started living according to our own natural cycles. Because if we can do that, we might just find that we're a lot more productive, a lot more creative, and a lot less stressed. What do you think about Michel Siffre experiment? Let us know about your thoughts in comments section. Thank you. Thanks for watching.